Welcome back. Today's story filled with drama and unexpected turns. Hit like, subscribe, and let's jump in.
Officer Miller was making his rounds around the park when he came upon me. As the light began to rise beyond the horizon, I almost passed out on a park seat. The late February morning was cold and foreboding. The maples, oaks, and a few elms that had survived the sickness had long been barren, and their leaves danced in the frigid wind that blew about me. I peered out into the lake's inky darkness, as the first rays of light had yet to illumine the chilly, dark waters. I was faintly aware that it had been hours since I had sat on this identical bench. After a time, the same sun, our life-sustaining golden star, sank into obscurity behind the lake as darkness fell over the placid scene. A thick dew fell all around me somewhere in the early morning, and the seat was dripping except for the point where my silhouetted figure stopped the dew from forming. Drenched leaves clung to the seat, held prisoner by the morning dew, signaling a chilly breeze that blew out of the north during the night, an unpleasant sign of the winter that loomed in the dreary shadows. As the sun continued to make its presence known, the sky became gunmetal dark, scattered with clouds that continued to accumulate, an ominous sky that promised bone-chilling rain reminiscent of late winter in the Midwest, with just a touch of snow. I regained consciousness when I noticed I was being jabbed with something hard, and a deep baritone voice rose beyond regular conversation but just below shouting or yelling said, "Hey buddy, you can't sleep here. The park is closed." I realized the item was the excellent officer's nightstick, and as I recovered consciousness, I recognized Patrick's voice. "What in heaven and earth are you doing here at this time of day?" he replied, horrified and dismayed, as he assumed I was one of the unlucky vagrants that made the park home on any given evening. "You're shivering," I heard him remark as he called an ambulance for a potential hypothermia sufferer. I wondered who had hypothermia. "It's only me and Miller here, and he's wearing a thick-lined jacket, cap with earmuffs, and gloves." This prompted me to do a rapid self-assessment, and as I glanced at myself, I realized I was the one shaking violently. I then remembered that I had sat down the day before with just my suit, tie, and formal shoes. I was undoubtedly underdressed for spending the night in the grasp of winter's precursor before me. I wondered what I was thinking. I knew I wasn't the kind of person who would expose himself to the elements unprepared. As the distant light crept beyond the horizon, I heard the unmistakable cry of the ambulance siren coming from behind Miller's police cruiser, shrouded in a musty blanket. Mildew was not the most unpleasant stench emanating from the cover, but I quickly felt the moderate reflecting warmth created as my chilled core gradually warmed up, slowing but not stopping my substantial shaking. My thoughts remained foggy, and any rational and acceptable explanation for my present situation eluded me as I was put on a stretcher, loaded into an ambulance, and hurried away to the nearby hospital. During the 5-minute trip, I was probed, prodded, inspected, and hooked up to several cables and tubes. Once inside the emergency department, I was evaluated and diagnosed with mild hypothermia, with a core temperature of around 83 degrees Fahrenheit or 28 degrees Celsius. They started administering a warm saline 4 to gradually reheat my core. The hospital phoned my boyfriend, who came around 2 hours after I was hospitalized. As I warmed up, I got more coherent and gradually comprehended why I had stayed in the park so late and sat on that bench. Earlier events had traumatized me. In fact, I only became fully aware of the cause of my actions when my partner broke into the room and started yelling at me, while my mind was preoccupied with what I had observed yesterday afternoon. My name is Jonathan Blake. I'm 37 years old, married to Catherine, 32, and have a daughter, Amelia, 8. I've always had migraines, and I started getting an aura, which means a massive headache is on its way. I summoned my assistant, Natalie, into my office and asked her to hold all of my calls for the rest of the day, cancel my appointments, and not bother me. I simply discussed my upcoming headache. She understood since she had seen some serious ones in the previous 12 years. I closed the shades and lay down on the floor beside my desk in the darkest part of my office. I put a pill beneath my tongue since the medication was administered sublingually. Natalie opened the door gently, after turning out the lights in the outer office. She came softly, put an ice bag on the back of my head, and carefully walked out, closing and locking my office door. The quiet and gloomy room, along with the medication and cold pack, managed to calm me down, and the aura quickly faded. It was 3:30 p.m. It was a Friday, so I decided to go home and enjoy the long weekend. I packed my briefcase and went to the door. I had put on my sunglasses to prevent the strong sunshine from causing a more severe migraine. On my way home, I drove carefully because I was scared the pain might distract me and cause an accident. When I got home, I opened my garage door to drive in and noticed Catherine's vehicle inside. I thought it weird since she was supposed to be at work at this time of day. I hoped neither she nor Amelia had come down with anything. I opened the entrance to the foyer, where the washing and dryer are, and entered the kitchen. I noticed nothing that suggested someone had been there since the morning. I passed through my living room and headed upstairs to my bed. As I neared the door to our room, I heard muffled noises. I assumed my worst worries had been realized, since Catherine was ill and watching television. As cliché as it seemed, the voices I heard became louder and more clear as I neared my bedroom door, which was slightly open. It looked that she had not been compelled to shut it. What I heard wasn't the television, but my wife talking. As I neared the door, I heard a masculine voice, which belonged to my old buddy Ryan. I overheard him add, "I don't have much time today because I have a client meeting at 2 p.m., so can we get right to it?" I heard Catherine express her disappointment as she replied, "Ryan, if I had known that we would even be here, I would have gotten you once a week as it is, and this is our time." Ryan responded, "I'm sorry, babe, especially since I know that old pal Patrick isn't up to the task of satisfying you." By this time, I had gotten into position to see them through the door. Catherine winced slightly when she said, "Ryan, that is not true. Patrick satisfies me in a unique way. I knew I wanted to try that large rifle when you showed it to me at your picnic last year. You offer me something different, not better, just different. You should be humiliated for doing this to your closest buddy, and if you keep bad-mouthing him, you will not receive any more of it." Ryan had been chasing Catherine for a while, and now that he had her, he didn't want to waste it. So he said, "You're correct, sweetie. I should be embarrassed, but am not, and it's because I've had strong feelings for you for a long time. I would leave Holly in a heartbeat if you simply said the word, since you know I want you all the time, but if all I have for now is a weekday afternoon, I will take it. I'm sorry, I know you love Patrick, and I like him, but I love you more, so let's get to it." Soon, my wife was nude with my old acquaintance. I could see had already begun banging her. The two lovers were finished, and I fainted outside the door. I heard Ryan say he needed to be going and recommended they take a brief shower together. I watched Catherine take Ryan's hand as they dashed to the restroom. The sound of flowing water returned me to my senses, and I understood I needed to go. I rushed into my vehicle and drove for what seemed like hours until I came upon the park. I chose to watch the sunset across the lake. I was numb by the time I got to the bench, and as I watched the light slowly slip into darkness, I realized what an apt metaphor for my life and marriage. Everything quickly became inky black, and my thinking followed suit. I lost cognitive knowledge of myself and my surroundings till Miller woke me up later the following morning. Now, as I lay in a hospital bed, the lady who had so completely violated me and our wedding vows was beside me, ranting at me nonstop. "Jonathan Blake, you had me worried sick. You didn't call or come home. I assumed the worst, that you were with another woman, and now I discover that you almost died on a park seat. What in the Sam Hill is wrong with you?" I answered by not reacting. I simply lay there in bed, eyes closed. I listened to the obnoxious beep of the alarm on my phone that had run dry, the machine that was monitoring my vital signs, and my wife's annoying catcall. Now that ID returned to the world of the living, or almost so, as it were, I needed time to comprehend the events of the day before, so I just ignored her. Of course, I understood this was not a long-term approach. I was sure she spoke with the doctor before coming in, but I figured I could blame it on the medicines for the remainder of the night. To be honest, I was exhausted after the events of the previous 32 hours, so I turned over and fell asleep. I found myself awake in the middle of the night, alone with my thoughts, and I started to wonder what had gone wrong and why. I wish I could claim I observed a shift in Catherine's conduct, but there were no warning signs. Catherine was sometimes distant, which was not uncommon. I would sometimes ask her what was wrong, and she would always say, "Nothing. It's nothing, baby." Catherine, a stay-at-home parent by choice, had plenty of spare time. During the week, she spent a lot of time with friends going to lunch, shopping, or seeing movies. They would sometimes go out in the evening to watch a more adult-oriented film. She had been going to the movies a few of times a week in the evening, and in hindsight, I should have been suspicious. But Ryan informed me Holly was also going, so I didn't question it. Ryan was most likely casting shade to conceal their secret meeting. When Amelia had a parent-teacher meeting one evening, I stopped Catherine on her way out the door. I said, "Where are you going?" She replied, "I'm going to the movies with Natalie and Holly." I held up my hand and reminded her, "Amelia's parent-teacher conference is tonight. You had to be there." She smacked her forehead, as if to imply she was a ditz. She frowned and said that she wanted to make a brief call to beg off. She reappeared after a few minutes, and we walked out the door. When we arrived at Amelia's classroom, I saw Natalie and Holly present with their spouses. I found that weird at first, but I assumed Catherine had called one or both of them and reminded them as well. I suppose that's why the shock of what I saw struck me so hard. I adored Catherine, my daughter, and our whole family. I was so content with my life that I couldn't fathom Catherine not feeling the same way. I've read a slew of explanations from those who have cheated on their lover or fiancé, as well as others who support such conduct. Some stated it was just sex and had nothing to do with you. If the other partner was completely pleased, they would not seek anything outside of the partnership. Another is the urge to be wanted by someone other than your significant other, either because praises from a partner are expected or because you fail to recognize them as an attractive and desirable lady. I will admit that complacency does emerge in relationships, particularly when they are older. I've always loathed reading about couples who have been together for 2 to 3 years and claim to be bored with their relationship, so they seek consolation outside of it. If you get bored or unsatisfied with your spouse in such a short amount of time, you should not have committed to the relationship in the first place. In terms of complacency in long-term relationships, if you have invested a significant amount of your life in another and developed a vested interest in that person, you should have developed a level of communication within your relationship to work on your issues, even if it means ending the relationship. When one person in a relationship decides to give of themselves, either physically, emotionally, or both, to someone other than their significant other without ending the previous relationship, the lies and deception required to maintain an illicit relationship are nothing more than a betrayal of that person's love and trust. There is no rational or acceptable argument for inflicting such anguish and humiliation on someone you pretend to love and cherish. If someone has the right to seek out another, it is appropriate to allow their existing spouse to object. However, a betrayed spouse has lost authority and been reduced to second-class status in their relationship. Their opinions and emotions are no longer taken into account when they should be. Ryan, for his part, is no better. He neglected to consider his wife Holly and their 2 children, Ethan and Grace. He has betrayed his wife and family, our friendship, and the confidence placed in him to be a part of our lives, as well as Catherine's trust in being a part of his family's life. However, such treachery extends beyond the confines of our own houses. Our extended family and friends will all become victims as sides are picked and charges of guilt are issued, whether fair or not. Dozens of interwoven connections will cease or never be the same as a result of 2 people's selfish conduct. When the nurse woke me up the following morning for medication, I saw Catherine was nowhere to be found. That startled me, considering her lengthy rant yesterday about how concerned she was about me. She knew I'd be up this morning, so where was my so-called loving, caring, and concerned wife so long after the rooster crow? I felt we shouldn't allow something as dreadful and tragic as almost losing the guy she claimed to love with every fiber of her being get in the way of real love, or was it just pure lust? In any case, she was unable to greet me when I returned to life. The doctor came in to inform me that he had signed my discharge papers and that I was free to go as soon as a transporter could be sent to bring me down to the front lobby exit. When he inquired about my wife, all I could do was shrug my shoulders, either in irritation, grief, or relief. The nurse said that multiple calls to the number she provided remained ignored and went directly to voicemail, the most recent being more than an hour ago. My assistant, Natalie, called and asked how I was doing. I assured her I was tired but okay and will be back in the office in a day or 2 at most. I had just finished up with Natalie when my sister Chloe and her husband, Patrick, walked in the doorway. They stopped by yesterday, but I was out of it, so they arrived just as I was being released. We spoke for a minute before the nurse came in and told me I'd be out in 30 minutes. That caused Chloe to inquire, "Where is Catherine?" I shook my head and said that I didn't know. I informed them that I had made multiple efforts to contact both her home and her mobile phone, and the hospital went straight to voicemail, so I'm not sure. Patrick said, "Perhaps she's on her way and her phone is dead. She must have neglected to charge her phone in the midst of the chaos." I replied, "That seems fair. However, I've phoned home numerous times in the last hour and received nothing except the machine. Our home is just 15 minutes away." Patrick simply nodded, unsure how to respond. I turned at my sister and said, "Did Catherine contact you the previous evening?" Chloe shook her head and replied, "No, she didn't." "Why?" I said, "There's really no reason. She was seeking for me that night when I didn't return home. I simply assumed you were on her call list." The nurse brought in my discharge papers for me to sign. I asked the nurse whether my wife had phoned, and she said she had not. Chloe and Patrick agreed to take me home, and as I was wheeled into the lobby, Catherine decided to make an appearance. She was in such a hurry that she almost slipped by us undetected. After recognizing Chloe, she slammed on the brakes and saw I was in the wheelchair. "Patrick." "Oh, darling, whither are you going?" I informed her that I had been discharged. She said, "Why didn't the hospital or you call me?" I replied, Catherine, both myself and the medical personnel attempted to reach you both at home and on your mobile phone. You never responded. All calls went to voicemail, and you never phoned back, so Chloe and Patrick stopped over and gave me a ride. Speaking of visits, I was curious what my old friend Ryan was up to. I was shocked my old friend didn't stop by. Did you speak with Ryan, by the way? Catherine hesitated a little and told me she hadn't talked to Ryan in a while. Well, never mind. You're here now, and that is all that matters. Are you ready to take me home? Catherine glanced at me, puzzled as to why I had said it. She said, of course, babe. What a ridiculous question to ask. I apologize for missing the calls, but my mobile phone died and I wanted to have my hair done this morning, so I was not at home. I didn't expect you'd be discharged so quickly, otherwise I'd have missed my appointment and been here sooner. Her hair looked newly coiffed. Perhaps she had not been with my old acquaintance since I caught them in the deed yesterday afternoon. Patrick arrived, and we said our goodbyes after I thanked him and Chloe for coming and offering a ride. As they drove away, Catherine rushed to fetch our vehicle to bring me up. While I waited, the orderly, a young guy about 22 or 23, remarked, Mr. Turner, you're a lucky man. Your wife is lovely. I complimented him. I had always thought the same way until yesterday. After viewing what I witnessed the other day, it's as if her beauty has faded overnight, flawed and faint in contrast to my recollections of her previous to yesterday's events. As Catherine pulled up and stepped out to help me, I looked her over and attempted to discover the beauty that my young buddy noticed so easily, but it was nowhere to be seen. Her betrayal of me, of us, was repugnant and terrible, and it projected outward. All I saw was aggravating hideousness, which damaged my picture of her to the point of repugnance and hatred. On the way home, Catherine asked if I was hungry and wanted to stop for a snack. I nodded, and she turned into Harold's Eatery. I like dining at Benny's because they had the greatest burgers in town. We sat down and placed our orders, and I chose a chocolate malt to wash it down with. While waiting, Catherine said, Patrick, what is the matter? Your attitude today, as well as your weird actions since yesterday, are not typical of you. What is the problem? I want to assist. I glanced into her eyes and saw her compassion. Nothing. It's nothing, baby. There's nothing you can do right now. She looked at me, perplexed, and our dinner came before she could respond. We ate in quiet, and as soon as I finished, I got up, paid the bill, and walked outside to get into the vehicle. Catherine appeared perplexed, but I explained that I hadn't slept well in the hospital and simply wanted to come home and recover. When I returned home, I took a snooze in my chair until Amelia arrived home from school. Daddy, I was very concerned. Are you okay? Amelia wailed as she raced up, leaped onto my lap, and hugged me tightly, refusing to let go. I'm fine, baby. There's nothing to worry about, is there? I glanced straight at Catherine. Catherine said, No, baby. Nothing at all. Daddy is fine. I thought I saw tears in Catherine's eyes as she dashed to the kitchen. I spent the day playing with my kid and helping her with her schoolwork. After watching some television in the evening, I brought her to bed and tucked her in. As soon as Amelia fell asleep, I left her room and shut the door. I told Catherine that I needed to wash and get some sleep before returning to work in the morning. I went inside and had a long hot shower. I accepted that she had cheated on me. I needed to determine what I wanted and what steps I intended to take for my future, Amelia's future, and all of our futures. I knew it was something I couldn't take lightly. It needed intelligence and judgment, as well as concern for everyone directly and indirectly affected. After a sleepless night, I awakened before daylight and got out of bed. I took another shower in the guest bedroom and left before Catherine or Amelia woke up. I stopped to the neighborhood eatery for some meal and a much-needed dose of coffee. After finishing a grand slam breakfast and 3 glasses of scalding hot coffee, I was out the door and on my way to work. When I got at the workplace, I was greeted by several well-wishers and asked many questions. I thanked them all sincerely, but other than catching up on work and making small conversation, I didn't say much more. After I'd caught my breath, Natalie entered the office with a nice cup of steaming black coffee, providing a much-needed caffeine boost. Natalie questioned Patrick, "Are you okay?" After a few drinks. "You look a bit sad." Natalie fell into tears at what had transpired. She was frightened that I had attempted suicide. I got up, stepped around the desk, and offered her a shoulder to weep on. When she had recovered her composure, I invited her to sit down. "First and foremost, I apologize if I worried you. I'm not fine, but I'm getting better, and don't worry, I didn't and don't want to damage myself in any way. Do you recall the day I left early due to a migraine? She nodded in agreement. When I came home, I went to my bedroom and saw Catherine having sex with my closest buddy, Ryan Reynolds. I needed to go out, so I went to the park to clear my mind. I lost it and just spaced out. The following morning, when Patrick Miller woke me up, I was suffering from moderate hypothermia. I didn't know I'd been there all night. I went to the hospital, where they warmed me up and admitted me overnight. Yesterday, I remained at home and relaxed, doing all I could to avoid interacting with Catherine. Natalie stared at me, and I could see disbelief on her face. My God, Patrick. I cannot think Catherine would do such a thing. I always believed you two had the ideal marriage. I did, too, Natalie. The other night, I spaced out due to my shock and amazement at her betrayal of our marriage and our commitment to one another. I need to determine what the next step is, so if you can manage it, I'll focus on my personal life for the remainder of the day. No problem, boss. I have stuff here. With that, she went out the door and returned to her office. I phoned my attorney, Jack Blake, and informed him of my findings and inquired about my legal rights. He informed me he had an opening in 30 minutes, and I said I would take it. I cleaned my desk and went out for the day. I got down with Jack and he gave me advice on divorce in Illinois. He informed me that I could apply for divorce based on adultery, but that it would have little effect on the split of marital assets unless I could show Catherine spent a large amount of money on her boyfriend. Also, since she does not work outside the house, I would pay alimony and child support. Would most likely have shared custody of Amelia. I thanked him, and now I understood where I stood if we had to split. I decided to have some lunch and headed to Benny's for a burger and fries, skipping the chocolate malt. I had a large piece of homemade raspberry pie and some coffee. With all of the coffee I'd taken thus far, I should have been energized, but instead I felt exhausted. I finished the pie and coffee, paid my payment, and went out the door to my vehicle. I decided to go home and chat to Catherine before Amelia came home. I needed more knowledge than I had right now, and Catherine was the only one who could answer my inquiries. When I got home, I found Ryan's vehicle in the driveway. I thought, I can't believe she'd bring him home so soon after I left the hospital. I sat in the vehicle and tried to calm myself down before coming inside. The rage that had been growing within was about to burst out, and if I found them doing so, I was going to harm him severely. I eventually got out of the vehicle and made my way to the home. As I unlocked the front door and entered the foyer, I saw Catherine weeping violently, her head on Ryan's shoulder. Ryan wasn't doing anything amorous or sexual, he was only attempting to console her. They did not see me, so I said, "Ryan, what are you doing here at this time of day?" They both startled, and Catherine ran over to me, wrapping her arms around me, while Ryan stood there stunned. Finally, he remarked, "Hello, old friend. I just stopped by to check how you're doing. I'm sorry I missed you in the hospital." Catherine interjected, "Patrick, what are you doing home so early? I've been so anxious about everything that's occurred. Ryan stopped by to ask about you." I lost it for a second. I looked her in the eyes and said, "We should discuss. Ryan, your worry has been noticed for what it is worth, nonetheless, do not trouble yourself. And if you'll excuse us." Ryan murmured, "Sure," as he walked out the door. I requested Catherine to take a seat. I started by adding, "Catherine, whatever is discussed between us will remain private for the time being. Ryan has no place in our marriage." She nodded, understanding. "Yes, Patrick, but why would Ryan be engaged in our marriage, and why would you believe I would include him in personal matters?" she inquired with apprehension. I said, "Well, you included him when you chose to start banging him behind my back. The day after my injury, I returned home with a migraine to rest and heal, only to find the two of you screwing each other in our bed, mine. The agony and depth of betrayal compelled me to leave before I murdered Ryan in the midst of your sex party. I walked to the park and was catatonic, almost freezing to death." She started to weep louder. She yelled, "I am so sorry, Patrick. Please forgive me." Suddenly, I heard the front door open, and Ryan entered. He stared at the trembling wreck that my wife had transformed into and yelled at me, "What the hell have you done, Patrick?" He made a step toward her as she lay on the floor in the fetal posture, and I stood in front of him. "Hey, jackass. Get out of my home. You came and screwed my wife behind my back, and now you want to put yourself where you don't belong." I didn't and would never touch her. "You have no rights regarding my wife, so if you don't want to be wounded, go." Catherine, between weeping, urged him to go, and he grudgingly went. I rushed to the window to ensure he drove gone. I turned to Catherine and ordered her to put herself together before Amelia arrived home. I instructed her to wipe herself up. As long as we're married, that thug is not allowed to enter this home. You are not to call, text, meet, or contact him unless you desire a divorce. Then you are free to continue. I added, we'll continue this tomorrow after Amelia attends Joe's sleepover party. As Catherine raced upstairs to shower, I called Joe's mother, Megan. I said briefly that Catherine and I were working on some difficulties and asked if she might take Amelia early. Megan said she would happily welcome Amelia over to help them prepare for the celebration, and she asked me to bring her at 9 a.m. I thanked her warmly and told her she was and has always been a wonderful friend, and that I would see her at 9. Amelia got home at 5 after basketball practice. Catherine remained upstairs in the bedroom while I worked in my home office. I phoned and booked reservations at our favorite Italian restaurant so Catherine didn't have to cook and we could retain some sense of normality in our family life, at least for the evening. I instructed Amelia to wash and dress before we went out to eat, then knock on the bedroom door and inform her mother what time we were dining and where we were going. Amelia said, "Yay." She rushed up the stairs, and I heard her knock and inform her mother before running down the hall and jumping into the shower. As soon as she heard the shower, Catherine came from our room, crept down the stairs, and searched for my response as she approached the bottom level. I said, "Come down, Catherine. I have not bitten you yet and do not want to start now. It has been a stressful and terrible day. Tonight is a family night, so let's put our issues aside and focus on taking deep breaths and spending time with our daughter. Tomorrow, we can communicate in a logical and polite manner. That will allow us time to reflect on where we are and where we want to go from here." "Okay, Patrick, I'm so sorry," she said. I just said, "I know you are sorry. Save it for tomorrow." We went out to dinner and pretended to be blissfully happy for Amelia's sake. If she knew anything was wrong, she didn't show it. She adored being allowed to order for the table and happily devoured her favorite dish, lasagna with Caesar salad and garlic knots. We went home and played a few board games, and Amelia lost by 10. She was fast asleep when I reminded her about the slumber party and that she would be leaving early to assist Mrs. Thompson, Megan, and Joe with their preparations. She hugged and kissed her mother and me, thanked us for a nice evening, and went to bed. I told Catherine I had some work to do and went to my office. I really simply wanted to collect my thoughts and be alone, away from Catherine. It was around 1 a.m. before I entered the guest room. My phone's alarm was set to sound at 7 a.m. I undressed, turned the blankets down, and slid inside. Exhaustion eventually claimed me as a victim, and I slipped into a restless sleep till the alarm went off in the morning. I awakened as the light attempted to break through the gloomy clouds in the early sky. These were clouds that predicted snow and shorter days in the approaching winter. As I gazed out the east-facing window, I received a fleeting sight of the morning sun before it was swallowed up by the freezing cold sea of clouds and would not surface again until that fateful day. I watched as a chilly, cruel wind blasted the last errant leaves from the maple and white birch trees that decorated our area. The home seemed warm and inviting, but as I watched the ruthless wind pull the final remains of brown trash down, I felt the chilly sting of the wind that blew, and I trembled as it nibbled at me in my imagination. The withered trees were cold and dead, and I saw them as a great representation of our marriage. It seemed dead above ground, but underneath had a robust root network that would anchor the tree and help it weather the harsh mistress of winter. When it appeared in the spring, it promised richer fields and fresh life, but only if the parasite was eliminated. I questioned whether the procedure I used would be effective and soon enough to salvage our family tree. I thought a lot about my marriage and our family. I decided to attempt to work things out with Catherine, but since marriage is a partnership, she would have a voice in the outcome. I justified each option and was ready to confront any circumstance. I had requirements in either case, and if Catherine did not satisfy them, I was ready to pull the plug. Because we had invested so much together and had a lovely daughter, I told myself that I would be friendly anyway. The only stipulation was that if she was associated with that sleazebag, the gloves had to come off. I heard Catherine as she walked down the stairs, and then I smelt the distinct scent of a new pot of coffee as it brewed. I went into our room and bathed and shaved in my own bathroom. I emerged invigorated and ready to face any challenge that the day presented. I woke up Amelia and told her she needed to be ready in 45 minutes. I informed her we were heading to Pancake Palace, and she sprang out of bed. That girl adored pancakes. I went downstairs and into the kitchen. I saw Catherine at the table sipping a warm cup of coffee, somewhat changed by her required dash of cream and 2 sugars, and she instantly got up and filled my mug with the nectar. I thanked her for the coffee. I informed her that Amelia and I had planned to dine at Pancake Palace and that I would drop her off at the party by 9 a.m. I assured her that after I returned, We'd have the whole weekend to try to deal with the 2-ton elephant in the room that was keeping us from enjoying our lives. With that, I persuaded Amelia to say goodbye to her mother, and we went out to breakfast. I sent Amelia off after she finished a double stack of chocolate chip pancakes, so she left filled and content to spend the weekend with her closest friend while she celebrated her birthday, which happened to be the following Monday. I said hello to Megan, and she said she hoped everything worked well. I thanked her and informed her that I will pick up the Munchkin Sunday afternoon. I got in the vehicle, and as I drove, I knew that it was time to clear the air, that the destiny of my family's future was in the balance, and I had no idea which way the scale would tilt on Sunday. I grew more worried as I got closer to home. I was prepared to battle for my marriage, but Catherine needed to meet me in the middle. One thing was certain: I would never agree to be a cuck, nor would I consent to any kind of wife-sharing or open marriage. Like Texas Hold'em, she had to go all in on our marriage or risk losing everything. I parked into my driveway, and as I stepped out, I felt a cold blast of north wind as the garage door closed, shielding me. I reflexively pulled my collar up over my neck, hoping that it wasn't a sign of things to come. I stepped carefully in the door and discovered Catherine clothed and at the table, as if she knew exactly when I'd return. She had poured me a new cup of coffee and beckoned for me to sit down. She began to speak, but I raised my hand to stop her. "Catherine, I promised you a chance to completely explain what went wrong in our marriage that prompted you to leave. And why did it have to be with someone like that sleazebag who was once my best friend? Do not attempt to defend something that cannot be defended. I don't want to hear that he's a kind man or anything else that might be used to justify what cannot be justified. He is persona non grata and dead to me, therefore any defense of him or his actions, no matter how little, will stop this debate forever, followed by the irreversible breakup of our marriage." I said, "If you want to seek reconciliation, I have a few ground rules that must be scrupulously followed. Again, if you are unable or unwilling to adhere to the terms put forth today, our marriage will be terminated and dissolved. I start by expecting and demanding fidelity. That is expected of a married pair united by love and religion. I promised and kept my faithfulness to you throughout our marriage, and I expect nothing less in return." Catherine burst out in tears after hearing that remark. I said, "Catherine, please, stop crying. It wasn't intended as an attack, it was just a statement of fact and a confirmation of what I anticipate if we decide to go." I let her a few minutes to calm down. I could sense she wanted to talk, but I told her to let me complete without interruption, and I would reciprocate. I began again. "Whether or not you agree, you betrayed me, our daughter, and our family by lying and cheating. However, it pales in comparison to what I consider the ultimate betrayal: your and Ryan's shared choice to hang the horns on me. He, the brother I never had, and you, the woman I loved with every fiber of my being, held me in such low esteem that our trust was broken. You both degraded and humiliated me, and the shock was almost deadly." I pushed on, the tears falling like a smooth, steady summer rain. I felt the warmth as they slid down my cheeks and tasted the salt as they passed between my lips and tongue. "Catherine, because of that fatal defect, that filthy contentious act, you threw one, maybe two, marriages into disarray and flushed an almost long-time relationship down the toilet. So my second condition is that you, Amelia, and I permanently cut off all contact with Ryan, Holly, and the kids." I told her that was a steep price to pay. It is up to the sleazebag to determine how to justify the breakup of an almost 30-year friendship. Hopefully, he can save Holly and the children some misery. So far, the death zone includes our two families. Every single member has been profoundly and brutally affected by the wanton desire and misdirected narcissism of two adults who should have known better and certainly behaved better. I overheard him say he wanted you to dump me, that he had desired you for a long time and that you should leave me for him. I'm curious whether any of you planned ahead or considered the effect of divorce on our extended family and other people who feel forced to take sides. I adore your folks. It sickens me to think that I may lose the strong connection we've built over the years, or that I would lose friends who feel compelled to select one side or abandon both in order to avoid such a dilemma. The loss of our children, forced to live in a one-parent household with either a part-time father or mother, families slain like sacrificial lambs on the hideous altar of infidelity, for what? What about some cheap thrills? Those are my words, a summary of my ideas and sentiments on the matter, and how my answer is totally dependent on your choices. Marriage is an equal collaboration, therefore I'm ready to hear your views and emotions, and the outcome will determine if this relationship is maintained or terminated. The floor is yours." Catherine considered what her husband had said. She questioned how he could ever contemplate salvaging the marriage if he had been cheating on her. He would be out on his buttocks, minus his balls. Perhaps I can salvage my marriage while still getting Ryan to screw me. Well, need to be more covert from now on, but my first concern is to preserve my marriage. Patrick, I'm sorry for hurting you, Catherine said. Tell me why and for how long. It has been approximately a year now. Last summer, we attended a barbecue at Ryan and Hollis. I had a little too much to drink, so I had to pee and accidentally stepped into the bathroom as Ryan was about to pee himself. I excused myself and tried to go, but Ryan urged me to remain. He reached behind me to lock the door, then reached into his unfastened trousers. I kept fantasizing about it. I attempted to resist until one day when Ryan came up. He said he'd desired me for a long time. I ordered him to go, but I'm sorry, Patrick, it was like catnip. I couldn't resist, so I led him upstairs and let him screw me. The sex was great, not better than when we do it, just different, but still enjoyable. I'm sorry, but I grew hooked, and we continued until I discovered you knew about it. I apologize, it meant nothing to me. Patrick, I love you and want to work on our marriage. Please forgive me. I want to reconcile. When she finished, I told her, Catherine, I need time to process everything. I'll be staying with Chloe and Patrick for a few days. Please go out for about an hour while I pack up. I need a few minutes alone. Okay, Patrick. Remember, I love you. With that, she exited the bedroom and headed downstairs. I heard the garage door open and her vehicle move away. I headed straight to work. I set up and turned on a number of nanny cameras we had when Amelia was a newborn. I placed them in the living area, bedroom, and kitchen. I had my mobile phone connected with my home phone, allowing me to listen in and record calls to my home number. I enabled the app and was all set. I hurriedly packed and left for my sisters. I informed Chloe and Patrick what I'd learned. They were astonished by Catherine's actions. I informed them of my intentions to divorce and sworn them to secrecy. I phoned Natalie and asked her to cancel the remainder of my week since I would be dealing with marital issues. She promised to manage everything and wished me luck. I lied when I told Catherine she had a choice and an equal voice, and she lied when she claimed it didn't matter. It meant everything to me. The lying and cheating were going to compensate for the pain and humiliation of my near-death experience, and my old friend Ryan would pay twice. He was in for a world of pain. I had devised a strategy, all I had to do now was put it in motion and carry it out. First, I asked my attorney, Dale Wilson, to start the paperwork and have it ready for filing. I withdrew the remaining cash from our accounts and saved $14,000 in our checking account. I used my retirement funds to buy the paper on my property, with a buddy acting as a go-between. I then paid off half the home on paper, giving Catherine the title and half of the mortgage payment. I utilized part of the money to put up a fund for Amelia's care and education. I intended to give her the home since I utilized all of my funds to pay my portion of the mortgage. She would only receive the home and be responsible for half of the mortgage and insurance payments. I took the money I reportedly paid out on my portion of the mortgage and deposited it in a Swiss bank account, which was rerouted multiple times before arriving in Belize. During this period, I listened to and taped multiple phone calls between Catherine and Ryan. They intended to resume their romance once everything had calmed down. Ryan proclaimed his love and desire for Catherine, saying, "I'll leave my wife tomorrow if you'll leave that jerk you're married to." Catherine informed him she loved him and wanted to be married to him, but she still desired him. He said that he would accept anything he could get. I got my ducks in a row, so I returned home on Friday. I arranged for the papers to be served that afternoon. I intended to pick Amelia up, explain what was going on, and take her to Chloe and Patrick's place for the weekend. I had put the wheels in motion. I also filed a complaint against Ryan for alienation of love and had it served while he was at his workplace, since he was locked out of his home. Of course, they were too foolish to stay away from one another. I had footage of them screwing in our bed on Wednesday, their typical practice since they assumed I wasn't home and would never find out. I set old Ryan up and hired a hooker known for having many STDs to entice him. He screwed her on Monday and then Catherine on Wednesday. I made sure to inform Holly so she wouldn't catch anything. Fortunately, there had been no intercourse with Ryan and would never be again. She was terribly upset, and when she heard what Ryan told Catherine over the phone, she was furious. I told her what I had planned, and she agreed. I informed her that I had proof in the form of recordings, including video footage of them in my bed. She was infuriated. I reassured her that they would both pay dearly. I assured her that my lawyer would handle her case at a discounted charge, and she thanked me as I left. I came home approximately 20 minutes before she was to be served. I informed her that I wanted to clear the air about her affair and the situation of our marriage. I told her I had never felt more deceived and humiliated in my life. I said, "Catherine, you are nothing but a liar, cheater, and genuinely dishonest lady with no scruples or moral compass. You not only intended to continue your shady affair with my ex-friend, but you couldn't even hold back long enough to attempt to preserve your marriage. You screwed him in our bed again on Wednesday. I didn't give her an opportunity to answer. I don't give a damn what you want or need, I'm done. Catherine sobbed, and as she began to speak, the doorbell rang. A lady approached the door and said, "Are you Catherine Turner?" Catherine said yes, but it wasn't the best moment. The young lady apologized, saying, "I won't disturb you for long. You've been served." She handed Catherine a manila envelope and took a picture with her phone before turning back and leaving. Catherine dropped on the floor, screaming. I walked upstairs to pack the rest of my clothes and personal belongings. I came back down the stairs and saw Catherine still laying in the entryway, utterly hysterical. I paused and placed down my things for a minute. I eventually asked her, "See, it's unfortunate that you lied not just to me but also to yourself. You persuaded yourself that I was a total moron. You believed you could have it all. You've just realized that nothing is indeed something, and your nothing crushed my heart to pieces. It's time for you to face the repercussions of your decisions." I grabbed my luggage and walked over her convulsing body. I placed the bags in my trunk and got into the vehicle. As I pulled out of the driveway, I saw our neighbors, Carl and Lisa Anderson, rush to Catherine's rescue. I saw people gazing at me, but I felt no pity, compassion, or sorrow. In reality, I felt nothing. However, I smiled at them as I drove away from the area and her life. I scooped Amelia up and brought her out for pancakes. I mentioned that I would no longer live at home. I explained what divorce entails and promised to stay at her side at all times. When we arrived to Chloe and Patrick's, Chloe had a lengthy conversation with Amelia. She felt better thereafter and wanted to call to check on her mother. I didn't ask, and Amelia didn't tell me how the call went. I asked Chloe and Patrick to join us for a weekend getaway to a resort 4 hours away. We'd remain overnight. We wanted to have a head start, so we retired early. After they went to bed, I sneaked out of the home and met up with my buddies Charlie and Frank. They would deal with Ryan while I was out with my kid. I went back to Chloe's and had a brief nap. We woke up early to tackle the trip. We arrived, and Amelia had a great day swimming. The following day, weather permitting, we planned to go horseback riding before returning home. We went out to a great meal. Amelia was still feeling depressed, so after supper, I took her on a drive and chatted with her. She was silent when I attempted to explain to her why I thought I needed to divorce her mother without bringing up Catherine's infidelity. I didn't want our daughter to become upset or disrespect her mother. Finally, Amelia asked, "Dad, Mom informed me she does not want a divorce, and neither do I, cannot you forgive her?" She said that she would do everything it takes to prevent it from occurring. She told me it was a huge misunderstanding and that I was reading too much into it. "Please, Dad." She informed me that if you left, I would never see you again. I told her, "Amelia, love, I'm sorry, but your mom's and my difficulties are complex. I'll deal with your mother when we get home, but I apologize. I do not think anything will change. Remember, this has nothing to do with you or how much we both love you. I will always be there for you, and you will see me a lot. I simply won't be living with you and your mother anymore." Amelia refused to talk to me for the remainder of the trip home. I was upset that Catherine would engage our kid in adult affairs. When we arrived back at the hotel, I asked Chloe whether Amelia was in her room. Chloe approached me and informed me that Amelia was upset with me for breaking up her family for no reason. I told her what Catherine had informed Amelia over the phone, and that it wouldn't impact the result. Chloe carried her baggage with her. I assured her I'd contact my lawyer first thing Monday. Maybe I'd get custody of Amelia if I could establish Catherine exploited our kid as a pawn in our divorce. I intended to record the chat on the house's concealed cameras. My daughter refused to sleep in the same room, so I had a terrible night. The next morning did nothing to ease her feelings against me. I concluded that if she didn't want to talk to me, there was no use in going on the horseback ride. It was chilly outside, but the sun was shining, so we could have rode. I contacted Chloe and asked her to inform Amelia that we were heading home. I begged Chloe to keep Amelia until I could meet with my soon-to-be ex-wife, and she agreed. The trip home was dark, with Amelia glum and grumpy. When we arrived to Chloe's, I handed them off and went directly to my previous house. While at Chloe's, I took out my burner phone. Charlie sent me a message the equipment was adjusted as needed, but it failed catastrophically and was sent to be repaired. The outlook is not favorable, it will most likely need to be replaced with a new model. I smiled, but I had to deal with something more urgent. I parked into the driveway, walked to the front door, and knocked. Catherine responded, and she seemed stressed and exhausted. "Why did Patrick knock on his own door?" I said, "because I didn't know if you had guests." She gave me a puzzled look that became angry. "Patrick," I said, "it was finished. Besides, Ryan is in the hospital. He was mugged as he left the Riverside pub on Saturday night. He has broken ribs, a cracked skull, a shattered arm, an orbital socket, most of his teeth missing, and both of his testicles removed due to serious groin trauma. He could require a catheter indefinitely." I said, "How do you know all of this if you are no longer in contact with him?" "Have you visited him in the hospital?" she nervously said. "Yes, but only because he didn't have anyone else." "Oh my God, Catherine. He is really in bad shape." "Have you have anything to do with this?" I replied rather harshly. "No. I was with our daughter all day Saturday and was 4 hours away from here. Now, why did you engage Amelia in our marital troubles? She is too young to grasp the complexities of the issue. Why do you believe it's okay to use our kid as a pawn to obtain leverage?" She looked at me with a straight face and said, "I'm desperate, and you've made too much of this. I promised you it was done and I wouldn't do it again. I made a horrible mistake. Everybody is entitled to one. Besides, everything is fair in love and battle, and I told you that I still love you." I stood face to face with her and informed her, with cold, steely eyes, "If you ever put our baby in the midst of this, you'll live to regret it. Do you comprehend what I'm saying?" I could see the horror in her eyes, and she nodded in agreement. "Good. We are done here. Chloe is driving Amelia back home." I turned and exited the front door. I contacted Chloe and asked her to drive Amelia home. Before I arrived to their residence, I had a drink with Patrick. He inquired if there was any prospect for reconciliation. He also mentioned how heartbroken Amelia was by the news of the divorce and what her mother had told her. I led Patrick to the kitchen table, where I put up my iPad. I downloaded all of the current footage from my home and showed him the video of Ryan and Catherine on Wednesday, as well as what she told our daughter over the phone on Friday. After reviewing my facts, he agreed that divorce was the only choice. Chloe returned home and started reading me the riot act about how upset Amelia was and how I needed to repair things. I showed her the tapes, and after she finished, she apologized and realized I had no real option, owing to Catherine. I called Dale and scheduled a meeting later that morning. I showed him the video and also handed him a copy on a flash drive. He suggested we might petition for primary custody, and with the appropriate judge, I could have a better than even chance of receiving it. I had her submit a revision to the custody arrangement and serve Catherine with the modified documents. A few days later, my phone rang. It was Catherine. I replied, "Hello." She screamed, "What the hell are you doing? I will never allow you to have my daughter, you son of a bitch. The gloves come off, and when I'm done, you'll own your ass. You won't even have a pot to pee in after I'm done with you, jerk." I just answered, "You'll see you in court." I gave my old friend Ryan a visit in the hospital. Even I was unprepared for the devastation I found. He was covered in bruises and bandages, with tubes everywhere. I remarked, "Hey, old buddy, I heard you had a rough weekend." He glanced at me with the one eye that wasn't wrapped in bandages. Suddenly, his heart rate increased to 180. I said, "Calm down. We can't allow anything as minor as you banging my wife interfere with your serious injuries. I simply come to express my sympathies. I will not dismiss my case, but I am sorry you were wounded." He gently said, "You did this." I informed him, "Hey, old guy, I was out of town with my daughter, sister, and brother-in-law from Saturday morning until Sunday evening. I just learned about your predicament from your mistress on Sunday night. I'm not sure who did this, but it was definitely not me. Besides, I need you alive and kicking so you can pay up if I win my claim. So, get well soon." I left soon as the nurse rushed in. It took many months for the divorce to get to court. Catherine attempted to resist it. Her attorney advised she get treatment. Dale requested that the court watch the tape, and the judge abruptly refused therapy and ordered the divorce to continue. He was critical of Catherine's exploitation of Amelia. Nevertheless, when he questioned Amelia, she said that she wanted to remain with her mother since her father was responsible for the dissolution of her family. The court felt compelled to award Catherine interim custody and order treatment for Amelia in the hopes of convincing her of the truth without ruining her. The court chastised Catherine while commending me for prioritizing my daughter's well-being. Custody would be reviewed after 6 months. 60 days later, I was free. Amelia was doing well in therapy and started talking to me. I apologized to her and assured her that I would have done everything to salvage things. After 8 months of treatment, she realized that her mother was deceiving her in order to salvage her marriage. A year later, Amelia expressed her desire to come live with me since her life with her mother was miserable. The judge awarded me custody. Catherine, meantime, was having troubles. It seemed that her home payment had almost quadrupled, and when she stopped getting child support, she was unable to afford it. The lender foreclosed and then sold the home to me on paper since I possessed the title. I now owned my property free and clear, and Catherine had no recourse or equity in it. Ryan never regained his masculinity, and for the rest of his life, he was forced to urinate in a bag by his side. The money I got was deposited into my Belizean account, and I invested it overseas in the hopes of someday replacing my retirement income. Catherine found herself living in a rundown apartment and being obliged to work. I paid alimony for 18 months. When Amelia moved in with me, Catherine ended up paying me child support. Even if she had the money for a social life, she didn't have one since no one wanted to date her. It's a tiny town, and the few who attempted were told she was persona non grata, and that if they wanted to date other women in the region, they should leave her alone. She is now cold, resentful, and alone as a result of Hollis' insistence on proving who was ultimately responsible for the dissolution of 2 marriages. Every time I see her, I see she has aged 10 years and looks dreadful. I wish I could feel sorry for her, but her behavior was reprehensible, and she paid the penalties. I have no sorrow for the activities that caused her to lose her house, spouse, and family. It's been over a year since I walked in on Catherine and Ryan. I was lured to the park beside the lake. I opted to sit on the bench. The air was chilly and crisp, with a faint tinge of winter chill. The sun's warmth decreased as it set, almost disappearing below the horizon. I sat and observed until the last rays of sunshine faded into the blackness of night. I thought on the events of the last year. I knew I had to go home and relieve the babysitter. To keep warm in the evening breeze, I pulled my coat's collar up around my neck. I got up and went to my vehicle. On the moonless evening, when I started the engine and put on the headlights, I felt fortunate to have gotten out the other side, scarred but reasonably unharmed. I peered out into the inky darkness and thought, this is nothing. Tomorrow, the light will rise and chase away the darkness, showering us in warmth and life, which is always something to look forward to. A guy finds his wife's infidelity with his closest friend, resulting in heartache and a custody fight. What would you do? Please share in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe.